I've noticed in the last 5 to 10 years a much higher consciousness around the importance of a headboard within a bedroom to really elevate the space and to give it that luxury feeling. So, with that in mind, I thought it might be helpful if I shared things for you to consider if you're thinking about introducing a headboard into your room, commissioning one, or indeed making one yourself. Starting with perhaps what might seem the most obvious question to ask, is a headboard really that important? So what I've done is I've taken 3 commissions which we've created and installed for our clients, and using the power of AI, I've actually removed the headboard so that you can see the difference. Starting with the first one, which is a beautiful, deep buttoned yellow weave headboard. And I remember actually this client specifying the yellow, and I was so excited because I knew it would be a real statement in this room. You can tell by the decor that it's a much simpler styling, which is wonderful for a bedroom to create that lovely calm feel. And we've got that gorgeous green wall at the back there, and the yellow sits beautifully against that green. The headboard here really is the star of the show. If that headboard was just plain, then it wouldn't give the same level of luxury that a deep buttoned headboard does. So it creates texture, it creates a layer of interest, and that's why it works so well. And when you look at the room with it taking it away, you can see it's quite bare and plain. The other thing to note is the height of that headboard as well. I've seen headboards that are far too low in relation to the bed, the pillows, and actually within the room. Here you can see that even though there are pillows on the bed, which are lovely and plumptious, there's still plenty of headboard visible. And those are the things that you need to consider when you're thinking about designing, purchasing, or making your very own headboard. The second example I want to show you is this gorgeous, gorgeous, dreamlike bedroom with the cascading voiles which are wrapped around these beautiful wooden posts, which we did actually fit to a bespoke wooden headboard that we created with our client. Now, the thing about this room is that it's got that wonderful height. So instead of taking up that height with an oversized headboard, there's a beautifully elegant corona to which we attach this incredible, delicate voile, and that cascades down and it actually hangs as well behind the headboard. On the sides, it wraps around those beautiful poles, again, which our clients sourced for themselves. When I design a headboard for a client, I actually create it to scale on some plastic, and then I take that to the client's house and I use a really low tack tape and I tape it to the wall. There were 2 things that we hadn't noticed during the build process. The first thing was where the light fittings were going. There were separate reading lights being installed into the wall. And when we first looked at creating a headboard for this room, they hadn't been installed yet. So I had to make sure that I designed the width of the headboard narrow enough to fit within those reading lights once those beautiful posts had been attached. So make sure all your lighting points and that sort of phase of electricians have come in and fitted everything, and you know where everything's going to be first. And then the second thing was actually sticking that template to the wall. Our client opted to raise it by 100 mil. 100 mil might not seem like a lot, but visually it's just those tiny scaling details that make the difference. So now let's see the room without the headboard, and you can tell immediately to not use the height of that room is a travesty. This is a really good example of dressing a space, not using a hugely patterned fabric to create drama per se. The palette's very neutral. It's the textures, it's the layering that makes all the difference here. The third example that I want to show you is an incredibly oversized headboard. And what you can see here is a stunning printed Timorous Beasties fabric. That fabric pattern repeat was so huge that actually once it was upholstered onto the frame, it is just one repeat that you can see, which kind of makes it look like a piece of artwork. So that's one of the things for you to consider as well as the fabric, but we'll get to that at the end. What you can see here when the headboard is removed from the room, again, it doesn't look like a finished space, and it does look like there's an opportunity for some drama. If you've got tight stairs or small doors, make sure that you can actually get the headboard into the bedrooms before you commit to it. What you may not have noticed, because it's disguised, is that it's actually in two parts. There's a big panel at the bottom, which is upholstered, and then there's the main headboard. We had this discussion with our client, who was very, very smart indeed, because he actually made the framework himself, and he had pre-thought all of these things through, and he knew that he couldn't get the full height of that woodwork up through this beautiful spiral staircase. So don't make the mistake of going for an incredible headboard and then not be able to get it into your home and the room in which you desire for it to be. The other design details are things like piping and studding. On that dreamlike headboard, there's a self pipe at the front and the back of the border. On the printed butterfly fabric, you'll see that there's piping and a line of studding. On the deep buttoned one, the fabric's wrapped around the headboard and it gives us a really nice soft feel. But if you wanted to add a little bit more drama to a deep buttoned headboard like that yellow one, then you could actually tack off that fabric onto the side and then attach a border, maybe with some piping or a fringe even. What I mentioned before was scale. When I'm designing a headboard, I always sketch onto the pattern where the pillows are going to sit, because that takes up 300, 400 mil of space above the mattress. And if, say, for example, you're going for a curve, that curve might cut into those pillows, and visually that wouldn't be, for me, very pleasing. So you might want to consider going up a little bit first on the sides, so straighter sides, and then into your curve, so that those straighter sides incorporate your pillows. Do feel that you can experiment with drapery above your headboard if you want to create height, but you don't want to create a huge headboard. Do make sure that you work out where your pillows are going to sit so that you've got enough headboard visually. And I would say err on the side of size. Go a bit bigger than what you think, because once it's in your room and everything is dressed around it, they do tend to kind of get soaked up by the rest of the bedroom. So you don't want it to kind of whittle away and just kind of be a nothing headboard. It does want to be visible, and it does want to draw your eye to the bed, the focal point of the room. Many, many moons ago, before we had our own in-house designer, I used to receive these drawings of bespoke headboards. And one of the details that was never considered was the width of the fabric versus the width of the headboard. If your fabric is a plain fabric, which is normally 135 to 137 centimeters wide, and your headboard is wider than that, then you have to consider where you're going to put the joints of the fabric within that headboard. With a plain fabric, those joins are really, really obvious because they're sewn in lines, literally. So you may want to consider railroading your fabric, so turning it on the side, making sure the height of the headboard fits the width of the fabric, and then upholstering your headboard that way, eliminating the potential for having to have these sew lines in place. I like quite a thick headboard because I want it to look substantial and luxurious. I don't want it to look kind of skinny and mean. So you can build that up either with padding, or it can be the actual depth of the frame itself. 2 inches, 2.5 inches, if you're going really fabulous, is a really nice depth, particularly to a thick or a big headboard. The last thing to consider is, of course, the fabric choice, which really is a huge decision maker as to whether a headboard is going to work in the space or not. If you go for a plain headboard, much like I was saying about that buttoned headboard, if it was plain, it perhaps wouldn't look as luxurious as it does. So if your decor is quite pared back and you're thinking about going for a plain headboard, maybe don't go for a plain linen. Look at something that has a bit more texture to it, or a beautiful heavy weave, or something of interest, so that it's just not simply a block of colour onto the headboard. If you were considering making the headboard a real feature in the room, then absolutely consider a large pattern repeat. This is a really great opportunity, which you don't get in many other places within the upholstery world, to really showcase a beautiful pattern repeat. If you think even with curtains, if you choose a big pattern, then there are folds within the curtain and you don't ever fully see the full beauty of the design. But because some headboards are flat, then you've got this real opportunity to create almost like an art piece. If you're concerned about maybe heads leaning on to the headboard and those natural oils from the hair and the skin actually transferring to the headboard, then do make sure that you choose a fabric which you can pretty much scrub. I always go for like a Linwood Omega velvet, which has stain resistant, and you can absolutely scrub that and it looks brand new afterwards, no matter the colour. Don't go for a cotton or a linen. Typically, they are the hardest to keep clean. Go for something that has a polymer in it and has maybe got a stain resistance to it that makes it easy for you to maintain. So I hope that's helpful. And if you've got any questions, please just let me know. And why not go luxury within your home?